That's up. That's up. Mitch, we are live. You're in the place to be. What's going on, man?
Just living the dream. Another beautiful, beautiful day here in San Diego. I got to work a little bit. I got to climb with friends. I got to walk my dogs, and I can't complain. How about you?
This sounds like a solid Wednesday right there. But
Yeah.
you set the bar pretty high, man. I just had work and went and did my workouts and got some food. Now I'm here, man. So, but it's still good. It was a good day, but you can't rise.
Food was the best part.
Yeah, food was always the best part, man.
Food's always the best part.
But before we get going, though, why don't you just give a little brief background about yourself so the audience kind of knows what we're about to dive into and what they might be getting ready for here.
Awesome. Let's do it. Yeah. So name is Mitch Hankins. I grew up in the Netherlands, actually. I lived there the first 20 years of my life. And, I had an American dad. So I eventually decided to move over to the United States by enlisting in the Air Force, especially just because I never felt at home there growing up. It was very this conformative culture, I would say, where I felt any attempt to be creative or unique was really suppressed. And I always had this idea of the United States as the ultimate place of freedom. So I always kind of had this urge to move here. And I realized that when I was around 20, I made the move here and spent a couple of years in the military, started a computer science degree, flowed my way into a software engineering role because I'd always kind of had this aptitude for computers. And, I ended up building a pretty solid life for myself. And, you and I chatted about this a little bit earlier, but at some point I really noticed something's missing. Like, I'm hitting those financial targets I'm setting, all these goals I'm setting for myself. I'm reaching them, but I still don't feel as good as I thought I would.
Yeah.
And I kind of went on a really introspective journey then, and I discovered that I didn't really have community. I didn't really have close friends. I didn't really have, much meaning in my life beyond the professional and, some personal goals I set that really didn't involve anyone else. And that's really when I set out to create more of a balance in life. And I noticed very much that this was an issue for many young professionals, especially engineers. And so I started blogging and speaking and writing about these things and coaching because I knew that this was just a huge problem. And ever since I started doing that, I got to say I'm a lot more in love with life just because it's not just waking up and grinding anymore. It's like actually kind of making a difference. Yeah. And that's, I would say, is my introduction.
Nice. So, going off that though, and I guess my first question to you that was kind of ringing in my head, and I know we talked about another podcast guest that I had on before, but is that like what you were doing, the grind and trying to get up to, make a certain amount of money and knowing that that's what success was, and is that the social norm of the modern world? I guess is that people think they have to, go get the master's degree or go get a doctorate degree now, and then be number one. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do this, obviously, but I'm just saying that, but it's in doing that, they put so much effort into this that they don't understand, like you call it a balance in life where, they're putting in 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, but they're not really understanding, hey, let me take a step back here. Am I really truly happy? Is this where I really want to be in my life?
Yeah. Chris, honestly, I see that everywhere around me. And I think there's so much expectations that are set for us and so much programming that we receive from society through like advertisement and the way adults, treat children, that we are really trained to conform to certain behaviors, and then we're good boys or bad boys, depending on how we do. And we really learn to deprioritize our own impulses, our own feelings of what feels right and what feels good to us in favor of other people's opinion of us. And we learn our whole lives, we internalize these lies as truth.
Yeah.
And really what it comes down to, I think self-development isn't so much as adding to yourself. It's more like sculpting, where you're chipping away all those lies and kind of coming to your own core and discovering who you are as a person. Because all we've really, as you said, been taught is that what success in the modern world looks like is to have a high salary and to be able to provide and to have a large house and a nice car and go on the nicest vacations. And, we're doing things we don't like to do, and we work a job that we don't like to support that, to impress people that we don't care that much
Mm.
about,
True.
and that isn't something I think we do super consciously. Like if you were to ask someone, they wouldn't probably right away admit to that. But, if you follow these routines for, decades or generations, it's just become so ingrained that we don't even really question it. Like to go against our parents' wishes or our family's wishes, that's almost, it's some kind of heresy. It's very disrespectful almost. And it's so important, I think, to really chip away those lies and really figure out what it is you want in life. Because otherwise you're just gonna, when you're on your deathbed, you're gonna have regrets. Like, I wish I had the courage to try that, or I wish I had done this or that. And I wish I didn't care so much what other people thought. Like, you will never regret trying something that you truly want to try, even if you fail. And it's all about that journey of self-discovery. And I think that that's pretty strongly discouraged, because you're expected to go to school and to have that nice job and all these different things. But you become so busy that you don't really have time to do any inner work. Like our whole society is built around keeping people busy through very menial stuff, like constant text messaging, both through, at work, like constant instant messaging, or constant social media notifications, or bombardments from advertisements. Like, we don't really have that period of solitude anymore, of really that quiet time where we really get to reflect on ourselves.
Sure. One thing, I'm guilty of this too. Growing up, like you told us, you said lying to yourself, and that one thing that whenever I went to go do something, I was almost not necessarily lying to myself, but I was also kind of selling it to myself. Whenever everybody was asking, like at family get-togethers and stuff, hey, what are you doing? Hey, I want to go for this degree. This is why, and it's probably the best choice for me right now. I feel like this is the right thing to do. And I remember just always having to, say things like that just because it was the right thing to say, especially to family members. Because if you were going to say, hey, I'm just going to renounce all my possessions and go backpacking across Europe and see what happens. Because then you'd be the black sheep of the family. They're like, "What are you doing?" And I remember and I don't know when it finally occurred to me that selling these lies to not only everyone else but to myself, I was like, this is not what I really want to do. And I think it was just like you said, I finally ended up in a certain position where you start out in a job or whatever, and it was kind of like what we were talking about earlier. But it's like, this is what led me to here. Like, just saying that I had to go do this type of job just to be successful in this era of my life, which is really not. Everyone else on the outside looking in sees it as successful, but I don't, and I'm kind of hurting inside.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was kind of what went down with me, graduating college, and just that the reason I went to get my master's degree just because it was like, oh, I have to go do this just because it'll help me get a better education or a better job. I don't have really anything else to do right now. So why not? So let me take out a couple loans, get another degree, and it'll help me, which maybe at the time it would have, but I'm one of those guys who, I was a PE major, and then I did sports management for my master's, and now I work in IT, which, wow, yeah, it's like, well, that did a lot of good. And that's, and like you were saying, though, even as a little child, and even my family members told me that I was always kind of attracted to computers and technology and just trying to, be the person that wanted like the cool new stuff and see like how it could help everyday life. So that might be a little bit of a ramble, but that's just what I was thinking about, how much I used to always have to say that, oh yeah, I want to go do this, this, and this, just because I don't know if it's people pleasing or just the right thing to do, but all the above.
It makes total sense. Yeah, I know. I can totally relate to that. I'm curious. Did you go for the PE degree because was that told you a lot when you were younger? Like, oh yeah, that would be a really good area to go in because maybe you can't sit still or something, or.
So when I first started, I started out in business in my bachelor's degree. And then just because, everyone always did business, right? I don't know or most people do business just because it's.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Just because it's business, right? Do business ethics or whatever. But I just did it just because I thought I was supposed to do it. I didn't really know why or how to plan for it. So I got halfway through business and found out I didn't like it. Maybe a semester or two in. Then I kind of got pushed into accounting. And
okay.
yeah, which I don't mind doing the work and like trying to figure out things. And I think that's kind of what attracted me to it. But, as I went through one semester of accounting, there's no way I can sit here and do this the rest of my life. Just sit here at this desk. And I think part of it is like, it was a sexy job, so to speak, just because you can make a lot of money depending on how good you are. And just if you don't mind working. So I kind of maybe got some bad advice and went to accounting. But then the third time, it was when, I don't know how PE came about, but it was kind of what you just said, that they're like, well, if you want to be active all day, and if you want to coach, and if you like sports, and if you just want kind of have the summers off and have a nice little job, yeah, like be a teacher. And I was like, well, that kind of makes sense, just teach people how to play basketball all day or whatever, and just have the summers off. That sounds perfect for me. And so that's why. And then I was already in year 2 or 3 of college. So I was like, well, I can't keep changing majors. And I mean, I can, but I shouldn't. So I just stuck with it. And now I liked it. Don't get me wrong. I learned a lot. I met a lot of good people, but it was just kind of like, well, like you were saying about this telling lies and selling things to yourself. It just made sense in that form at that point in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say that, because I kind of went on a similar trajectory. And, growing up, I was always told like, I'd be doing something like that. Teachers would always kind of encourage me to go in that direction, and then I ended up like in a tech related field too. Right. So I kind of have to laugh at that. But, and also when it comes to education itself, I do think it's very beneficial. But the problem with education itself as well is that I don't think it necessarily trains or creates creative thinkers. It's very much a perpetuation of creating almost, soldiers. Like when you really look at the history of it, the old Greek model of it was where they taught grammar, rhetoric, and logic, where grammar was, knowing what words meant, logic meant knowing how to use words and how to make a case, and rhetoric meant persuasive speaking, essentially. So people were very, that's why you had that boom of all those philosophers and all that really introspective thinking. And then the Romans came in, and they didn't need creative thinkers. They needed soldiers. So their school system was built around obedience and about, being a cog in the machine. And that's really what the modern society is still based off of. And, school doesn't encourage teamwork. If you do that, it's called cheating. School doesn't encourage learning from failure, even though in real life, failure is a stepping stone to success. And now we have this whole society just terrified of failure because we think it's bad. And that really starts in childhood with school and things like that, even though I think failure is one of the best things that can happen. So I think school is a really good thing. Education is a great thing in general, but I think it can set up people on a path for failure just as much as it can really set up people on a path for success. Like I personally dropped out of a computer science degree. I made it about halfway through, and then I got hired, and then I was like, you know what, I'm done. And I never went back to it. And now it's kind of like, I don't know, almost, I don't want to say badge of honor, because I do think in many cases a degree comes in really, really handy, and it really does teach people a certain type of structure in these things. But, we live in a day and age where you really can choose to go your own path. Like you can go on the internet, teach yourself things. Like you don't need to take that path that is kind of set by expectations.
Yeah. Sometimes when I get on here, I feel like I shit on education a lot. and
I'm trying not to.
Yeah. And I don't mean to, just because, I was very fortunate to have, my degrees, and I learned a lot. I met a lot of good people along the way. But it's like what you just said, though, that if you have any idea of what you want to do in life, if you want to go be a programmer, or I don't know, run a entrepreneur, some type of business of whatever, you can do that basically with the YouTube University now.
Yes.
You can go look up anything you want, find out what people are doing, take master classes or whatever, and there's really no need to take out thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars just to get a piece of paper on your wall just to say that, hey, I went and did this. And which it's good. I mean, I'm not saying that, you should just drop out of college right now, but and I've said this a lot of times on here too, that it was exactly to your point, that it's schools seem to be set up to teach you what to think and not really how to think. Yeah. And that I'm wondering, though, in this new modern world where we have these long drawn out conversations like podcasts, and that, there's other ideologies people can listen to about, I don't know, any hot button topic there is, or even just any industry there is, that you don't have to always listen to what, your your typical algebra teacher's telling you there and whatever her beliefs are, and that where you can't go, where if she tells you that, hey, there's dolphins that orbit around the moon, but I don't know if that's right. Let me go look this up, where I can fact check right now, right? I think pull out my phone real quick. So, and that's one of the things now where you can, and I'm wondering if that's the tipping point in education now, that we're seeing that maybe a change of model of education. Now, this is not an educational podcast, but changing the model of how we do things. And maybe there's a way to restructure the educational system where we can teach people to be free thinkers. Oh, did you freeze up? Uh-oh. Right. Okay, you're back. You froze up for a second. So, but yeah, if we reach this tipping point where people can start to be free thinkers and let's not go down, they make their own path,
Yeah, I completely agree. That's actually why I'm so stoked, because I do think we're facing quite a few issues. Like that's, we don't have to go into why, but obviously as society in every country, we're facing a lot of issues. And that's one of the things that make me so hopeful for the future, is exactly that point where we don't have to rely on dogmas anymore. We don't have to rely on what other people tell us. Like with the internet and everyone being connected, I mean, there's a lot of downsides to it, which I've written about a lot. Like, it's definitely come at a cost where it's creating certain barriers between people, where, we're eating the menu instead of the meal kind of thing due to the internet. Like definitely, I would say like meaningful in-person interactions. Now a lot of things are happening online, but also, as you said, the fact checking, and the newer generations can instantly look, everything's at their fingertips, and they're no longer constrained to all the molds that have been set before us. And I feel like that's really, if you want a society of free thinkers, I think that's the very foundation of it, where people have the freedom to express themselves, and the ability to do that, and also to look things up. It's never been easier. And, we all know how quick young people are with their phones. Like that to me is incredibly exciting. Because I think that can change the society. Like, it can't be contained. Like you have a lot of authoritarian governments that are trying, but in the end, I think with the technology that we have, it's really unstoppable. Like it's not something that can be held back anymore. And for me, that's the most exciting part of our future as a species, is just the free flow of information is everywhere, and to me, that's by far the most encouraging development, I would say.
Do you know who Andrew Huberman is?
Yeah. I listened to his podcast.
Yeah, he's got a great podcast. I listen to him from time to time too. And I was listening to him, was it yesterday or today? But anyway, he had Lex Friedman on there, and he was talking about kind of the educational system, to where, and kind of to your point, where more children are smarter now compared to, I forgot how many years he said ago. And that his point was that, I can't remember if it was like UCLA or Cal Berkeley or one of the universities, but I think a professor ended up quitting just because of how smart, I can't remember what professor, it was a her or he, but the class was just kind of calling them out on certain topics about whatever she was, lecturing about, and that she ended up quitting just because she couldn't handle, I get, not the criticism, but just couldn't handle how the students were already smarter than her, so to speak.
Right.
So, and I think a lot of people, like to put down technology in certain ways. And I'm not saying technology is awesome, but I'm not saying it's terrible either. But to that point though, where, you have the capacity to look up anything you want at any given time, and then you read it, you hopefully remember it. And that kind of, you go down rabbit holes and stuff, and you learn a whole lot, hopefully, depending on what sources you're going after. And you can start to retain this information and express your own forms and opinions. And it makes you maybe a little bit more rigid, maybe a little less rigid. Not sure what the word I'm looking for here, but you're able to, if you feel confident enough to, express those ideas in front of somebody who is supposed to be the smartest person in the room and not be prepared. Yeah. Then it's a cool way to, I guess, learn. And even though it's not the status quo of learning, it's just I'm not saying it's a better way, but it's a good way. That's to our points that I've learned a lot more by Googling stuff, watching YouTube videos, reading
Yeah.
my own books that I've actually said, hey, let me go see what this guy's talking about, see what he thinks. And having these conversations to see your point of view and the way you see things and just like, oh, wait, I really never thought about it that way. That makes perfect sense rather than just being stuck to a one fixed mindset.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. I think that's why being challenged is so good. Like, I think that's what I struggled so much growing up in Europe, where it was very much like, don't challenge this, don't rock the boat, don't challenge things. And that's the problem with the old school dogmatic education, where it's like, don't challenge, just consume information, just like, kind of gets forced down your throat almost, kind of, to put it cruelly. And or crudely, and it's really when you get to challenge things is when you get to learn. Like when I was in school for computer science, I didn't enjoy it because it was professors literally lecturing. It's not interactive. It's not where you get to say, hey, why is this so, or I think it should be this and this way. And it becomes a really static, fixed mindset environment versus, I taught myself coding. I barely learned. I learned a lot of interesting things about computers, but I didn't learn truly how to code, like on the level that companies are willing to pay for from school. Like I learned that by going online, as you said, by following YouTube videos, by following tutorials, and by challenging things, like by challenging my knowledge, by challenging conventions and standards and messing up and learning from what I did wrong. And then, you're going to remember it better. Like when there's an emotion attached to an experience, like failure or success, like when there's an excitement or embarrassment tied to it, emotion is nothing more than encoding memories in the brain. And that's how you remember things. That's how you learn things. And that's how you can get better. And, the whole education system tends to be such a lifeless tract that by the time you get out of it, you retain maybe 1% of it. And then really when you get to a job, especially as programmers, like by the time they get out of a computer science degree, it isn't so much like they're ready to work. It's unlearning all of that education first and then learning how to do it the proper way. And so no, education isn't a bad thing, but it has to be seen for what it truly is. And it isn't the holy grail. And, it isn't the 70s or the 80s where you go get a degree and you work for the same company for 30 years and then they pay you benefits until you die. That's not the reality we live in anymore. Like 401ks aren't even true investment accounts. Like they were designed as saving accounts for the rich, and now they're used as equity accounts, right? But that's not even what they were designed for. It was literally just companies saying like, hey, we had these defined contribution plans, DCPs, and now it's where you get to choose yourself, like with 401ks and such. And for companies, those defined plans were too expensive. So we switched to these 401ks, and that took all that certainty away where you weren't going to get a pension that was fixed, that was steady until you died. Now it's all like what you contribute to it. And that certainty of go to school, get a job, stay there for 20 years, retire, that just isn't reality anymore. And that is in some ways a disadvantage. I think, in the past it was a lot easier for people to get that job, to get the house, to, have the basics in life. And nowadays that can be a lot more challenging. But also because of that, there's so much more opportunities. Like look at all these kids going on TikTok or on Instagram and, influence and making money. And you can have different opinions on it. Some provide more value than others. But the idea is, you can really go in any direction that you want. The only thing from my experience that's holding people back is fear, like fear of what are other people going to think. And, the fear of yourself of like, what if I fail? That's really the only thing holding people back. And if you listen to podcasts like these, there's so many people that made that journey and that say like, well, the only thing you're going to regret is not trying. But within this landscape, because of those issues within education, there is so many opportunities for self-expression. It's nearly limitless,
Sure.
And I don't know, but I think that's pretty exciting. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it where you're like, how are people making money doing this? But it's there, right? Like
It's definitely there. Or there's good ways of what are you doing? Just faking it to the world and just
Right.
people living in complete debt. And there's I mean, to your point, all right, before I get sidetracked though, one thing you're talking about when starting something and looking like a fail or being failing at something or looking like a fool to starting something new. Somebody asked me last night that uh have I ever started a business or am I an entrepreneur? And so, well, besides this podcast, I don't even know if I would say that's entrepreneurship, but I've never really started anything as far as business wise. And he asked me why, and I said exactly what you said, well, fear of failure, and
Mhm.
that I have a small, I guess, safety net that I could fall back on if I were to go down that road and start a software company or something with you, Mitch. Let's just say that, for example, and then if it fails, yeah, I guess I can move back in with mom, but that's not
Mhm.
where I'm set up to do, and I think the whole point of the conversation was that, I have a typical 7 to 4 or 8 to 5, whatever you want to say. And that
Mhm.
I'm very fortunate and blessed, I guess, if you want to say that I don't mind going to work every day. It's one of those things that, it's a good job. I have good people around me and, where
Oh
I'm
yeah.
still kind of freshly new into the IT world. I'm like 3, 4, 5 years in now, but it's good. I don't have the
Mhm.
typical job where most people who are probably going into a certain office and
Yes.
sitting under fluorescent lights, almost like a prison, and just waiting till the break time, and or even people with blue collar jobs I've ran into people who took up smoking just so they could have more breaks. Just go outside
Yeah.
and smoke outside.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
and like you said, that's what they do for the next 20, 30 years. And it's, well, this is life now or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was one, and that my situation is a little bit different, but do I want to start something new? Like, yeah, this is kind of why I maybe started this podcast. But
Mm.
also, though, I'm in a different situation too, though. Is just like I said about my job and everything. So, and I already forgot
No,
the other point I was going to bring up. Sorry, but yeah, go ahead.
I'm sure it'll come back. No, yeah,
Anyway,
we'll have a lot of different tangents. No, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, I think entrepreneurial is more for, um, I think those desire comes at some point in life, but only when you're really fed up with like an office job, for example, or just circumstances in life where you yearn for that freedom or that control. And there was definitely a part of my life where I was happy working in an office and doing those sorts of things. But there's so many different ways you can express that. Like, I think it's perfectly valid to have a job that you enjoy going to in an office, and there's a lot of benefits to it because as an entrepreneur you don't have the same kind of stability. um, but there's still many different ways you can express it outside of work. But I still think we take that mentality of school with us of failure is bad, so where we're still, I'm sure that you had many fears around starting a podcast and yet you did. um,
yeah,
right, like
I'm a
what are
chubby
people?
guy. I mean, dude, like
Yeah.
posted the first episode. I mean, it took me literally. Like I had it sitting ready to go, and like I can't remember how long, but it was at least a week. I just kept staring at it, and I'd come home and just like
Mhm.
I'd have it upload. Like, all right, so I submit it. I was like, oh nope, no, I can't do that. I can't. I'm scared. Like the internet's ruthless, man. It's cruel.
Right.
Can't do it. Can't. And so
So
I would sit on it.
So what got you over that initial hump of like what made you go screw it, I'm submitting it?
I think it was just because that I recorded it with one of my best friends. It's just been sitting out there, and he kept asking, like, "Have you posted it yet? You posted it yet?" And
Mhm.
no, and I think just finally that. And I was probably me listening to another like a Joe Rogan podcast or something like that.
Mhm.
They were, got me all hyped up, wanted me to run through a brick wall,
Mhm.
uh, and it just went into something that, well, if you're going to go down this road, if you're going to hit submit, that you have to be able to accept whatever's going to happen once you
Yeah.
press uh, upload or whatever. Just because, good or bad, if you want to do this, is how it's going to happen. And then I remember
Yeah.
started thinking about like people who became out as musicians and whatever they had to go through that, like
Mhm.
Nickelback, so to speak. When they came out, everybody loved Nickelback, but now they're just, it's like if you say you like Nickelback, that's uncool for some reason. And I never really,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I never really understood that. That's still jam to them. I don't mind. I'll play them in a gym. But
Yeah.
but yeah, if you say that to other, I guess I don't want to say, I don't know, really mainstream people. I don't know, but like, oh, you like Nickelback? Like, what the hell, right?
For sure.
And I
Yep.
think that's, and to your question though, that's what it was just that, hey, this is it.
Yeah.
If you want to do this, this is the battles and challenges that you're going to have to put yourself through. And even though if you say something stupid on a podcast, you misquote something, that you just got to live with it. People make mistakes.
Absolutely.
And that,
Yeah.
and like you were talking about failure, and it's just that's what has hit me, that. And one thing, that's what CrossFit has taught me too, that, and have these humbling experiences in life where you get an ego check and a little slice of humble pie, but all right, cool. All right. I've made a mistake. I failed at this, but let me fix on it and think on it. And I'll make sure I don't do it again, or hope I don't do it again. So I think that's a long answer, but I think that's just what it was just say, man, just if you're going to do this, you got to go for it, man. You got to have a great moment. You can't, you're not going to do anything great just sitting here staring at your screen all day and not pressing play. So
100%. Yeah, no. And I mean, that makes total sense with me. It was the same for me taking on my journey of breaking away from a tech career, I would say, and more so focusing on writing and speaking and coaching, because at some point you're like, I just got to do this. Like, it feels right. And that's why I guess I can be so vocal about education, because I feel like it beats that out of kids, like that desire to try, because it just instills people with this fear of, if I fail, I'm bad. And I'm so mad at society for teaching that to kids, because every single human being has something unique. Like, by definition, every human being has lived a completely unique life, and everybody is a master at something. Everybody can teach, has something to teach. And everybody has a desire to creatively express themselves somehow, and again, it doesn't have to be an entrepreneurial way. You don't have to quit your job and become an entrepreneur, but just expressing yourself in a way that is completely authentic without being too concerned of people's opinions. That is very unique to run into. I would say like every 1 out of 30, 40, 50 people I talk to does that. Yeah. It is such a unique thing to run into. And that shouldn't be, I think that's the most messed up thing in our society. That shouldn't be the unique cases. That should be the standard, where everybody is like that. And I don't know, I kind of wonder sometimes, like, what kind of world will we live in? And everybody just felt safe and okay to do that. And didn't have to feel like, oh, I have to project this certain image, or, I have to look like this or talk like this in order to be accepted. Like, that is really what I wonder the world would be like if everybody just was living themselves truly authentically and expressing themselves authentically. And I don't know, I think we'd live in a much more lighthearted world, a lot less people looking to push negativity on other people. I don't know. And I think with that whole, tying that back to the kind of the creator culture where, you've got all these young kids on TikTok and on Instagram making content. That's what I think that is moving towards, where people are expressing themselves more. Granted, as you said earlier, like, people on the internet are mean. Like, that is still a thing. But I think
though that, do you think the world is moving into that realm right now? I guess I should say, because I think that too, just because of the internet and being able to, so I guess my point, maybe put my thought together on this, that there is so much more coming out about, gender issues and equality and racism, and people are expressing their voices basically through podcasts and protests and, I guess, news segments and Instagram and TikTok and whatever, that people are starting to feel more freer in saying things that are actually whatever's deep inside them, and knowing that, hey, if you come out as homosexual or you come out as transgender or whatever, it's more accepted now. Where if you were to say that 10, 15, 20 years ago, you had to hide it just because you were going to be the outcast or the black sheep of that. And and not only to those points though, when I had another guest a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about how he wasn't the true form of what you would say masculinity is, just because, he doesn't mind expressing his feelings. And, but if he were to say that a couple of years ago, that, he would seem soft, so to speak, or sissy is how he put it. And then I guess my total point though is that, 20 years ago, we weren't, you weren't supposed to have conversations like that, or it was weird to have conversations. But now when we talk about mental health and gender and racism and have these conversations and have good dialogue with it, I guess that it's becoming more acceptable to the world now. In fact, people can really understand, like, okay, they just don't feel this way just because somebody told them to. They actually feel this way because they feel this way.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I feel the exact same way as you do. And I think that's what I'm so freaking stoked about, and that everybody can. Okay. So even if you look at the word respect, right? To me, respect means just leaving something in its original condition without expecting it to change. So, like, whether you respect people whether you treat people with respect or nature with respect, it's just leaving something in its original condition and accepting it as it is. I think respect is increasing, where we are allowing people to express themselves without them being afraid of like any kind of repercussions. And that for me is incredibly exciting because, one of the subjects I frequently talk about is actually mental health. Like, talking about that about that time difference versus 20 years ago. Like, I'm 30 right now. Growing up, the way I perceived masculinity was, and the way I was raised, I have amazing, fantastic, hardworking, and compassionate parents. But the way I was raised is suck it up, buttercup. Like, if you have issues, figure them out. Like, that's we're here to share an excitement. But if you've got hardships, keep it to yourself and figure it out. Do something with it. I once walked home. I had a moped, and I kind of modified it to go a little bit over the speed limit. So one night I was driving home, and I ran into 3 deer. And mind you, I was on a moped. I killed 2 of them on impact. I skidded across the asphalt road. I woke up, I don't know how much later, but it felt like I was in a different reality for a couple of minutes. And I had to steer my moped. Like, I had to hold the steering wheel completely 90 degrees to the left in order to go straight. Like, it wouldn't start anymore. So I just had to like walk with it. And I had a broken foot and a messed up wrist to the point where I was in a wheelchair for a couple of months after this accident. And still, I didn't call anyone. I walked home for 2 miles with that damn moped because that's just, again, that's the condition I had received. Like, you're a man, get it done. Don't bother other people with your problems. And that's kind of like the epitome of like what demonstrates the mentality I had really well, where it was like, if I'm in pain, it doesn't matter. I don't bother anyone else with that. I solve that myself. And it was the same with my emotions. So I really learned to not bother anyone with those sorts of things. And that really continued into adulthood, where I channeled all of that, I would say, frustration and pain into growing a career and teaching myself coding and becoming financially independent. But it came at a cost. It came at a cost of not building community, of not having really close friends, of, I've lived in 7 states, 2 countries, many different cities. And it took me, I would say, almost until my 30th to kind of start realizing that and to actually start building a meaningful life. And that was all because my idea around masculinity, around mental health for men, was something programmed outside of me, by society, not beliefs that I truly had on my own. And I had to dismantle all of that before I could start living a truly meaningful life. So to your point, that was all rooted from a time where it wasn't normal to talk about those things. And it wasn't, at the time, it wasn't normal to say like, hey, I'm feeling, depressed, or I have anxiety, and I need to talk about these things. And, now we're living in a time where I'm actually blogging about them. Like, I'm noticing these patterns in everyone. I'm writing articles about like, what it does to our health. And I'm having conversations with people like this, on podcasts and in person. And it's just become way normal. There's still people that become a little bit uncomfortable with the subject. But, compare that, as you said, to 20 years ago when you couldn't talk about these things at all. And I think there's a lot of people still suffering from that, but probably a lot less than, 20 years ago when all these things couldn't be talked about at all.
I feel 100% that a lot of people are still suffering in silence in some
Yeah.
sort. way, and that everybody has problems, but mental health issues keep coming up little by little by little, like it's on the rise. And there is a
Mhm.
mental health issue in this country, and that I don't know if because it's something new, and that now that
Mhm.
people are trying to figure out, like, oh, okay, well, now it is a problem now. So what do we do to fix this
Mhm.
thing? And that it's kind of like trial and error now. So there's not a lot of, I don't know how much research there is. And I'm probably the last person that should be talking about it, just because I don't know any stats and figures and any of that way. But
Mhm.
it is come to seem that everyone is starting to agree on that, hey, there is something going on in this world or nation, whatever you want to say, that mental health is on the rise, and that now it's time to start taking a look and finding out what's going on with it. But why? And that was my point to that point. But your first point, though, when you were talking about kind of just being really independent and not really going to people with your problems, that's something that I've been dealing with the last who knows how many years, and that
Mhm.
I just can't seem to get a bearing. Is that the word am I looking for? The bearing on it? I don't know, or a grasp on it, just
Mhm.
because that I've always felt that I've been the solution to people's problems, that with friends and family, right?
Right.
And I don't
Right.
know if it becomes from childhood trauma or stems from that, because of that's where maybe all people's problems come from,
Mhm.
childhood trauma. But I always felt like if I were to ask for help, that I was being a burden on somebody,
Yes. Yes.
and that it was just
Yeah.
like they would help or they would forget to help me, even if it was a favor or something, even something small. And that it got to a point where if they would forget to do, X thing that I asked for, that I was like, all right, well, fuck it, I'll just do it myself. Whatever. I don't need that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just, and I don't know. And I'm 36, and I still do that today, where I rarely, rarely, rarely ask out for a favor or something, just because still I feel like if I were to say, "Hey, man, I gotta drop my car off and get an oil change. Can you give me a ride to work or something?" Just
Yeah.
like I feel like I'm imposing and being a burden on somebody. And yeah, and
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking about while you were talking. Just that, and I just still haven't been. But at the end, I don't mind helping people, just because part of success that I think is what it means to me is that when I help you do a task, or I don't know,
Mhm.
just anything, little thing that I could help you out and be a solution to your problem, it makes me feel good inside to helping
Right.
people. Yeah.
Right.
But at the end of the day, still it's just like, all right, whatever, just go back and do my thing and whatever. So that was my whole point, is I always felt like I was a burden on people.
Yes.
That was
I mean,
from,
I can relate to that. I think that's definitely a very common pattern among people, and especially people with childhood trauma. It's that feeling love. If I ask for help, either I'm seen as weak or I'm a burden. But I felt that way for many years. But I would urge, you and anyone listening also, asking people, if you look at it this way, if just as you said, when you help someone, it makes you feel good.
Mhm.
So when you refrain from someone asking good for their help, you refrain from asking someone for their help, you also kind of take away that opportunity for them to feel good, and for them to create a meaningful bond with you. Because when you do learn to really lean on other people and ask for favors, and not be a user, but be there for people when they need it and ask them for help and be comfortable with that, it creates a special bond between people too. Like, it makes other people feel needed, and it does something like kind of, magical sounds like a wrong word, but I've noticed in from my personal experience, when I kind of started doing that with friends I trusted, it created like a really much deeper bond um, where they were, I almost felt like people were happy to show up for me. And that was for me really, I would say healing almost, where I was like, oh wow, like I'm not a burden. Like, people actually like helping me. Like, it makes them feel good about themselves. Like, I think that's one of the most powerful things I've discovered about, relationships yet.
Do you think, touch, I guess, I don't know if I should say this is a mental health issue, but do you think in this world, in a modern world again, that too many people are afraid to say no, and there's too many people pleasers, and that's kind of what starts to
Yes.
become a mental health issue, just because of
Yes.
doing so many, yeah, I mean, you've already answered the question, but doing so many tasks or whatever it is for people, and then it becomes that, hey, I'm getting almost taken advantage of here and I'm not getting anything out of this, but now I'm trapped. I can't get out of it. I guess is that.
Yeah, I think so 100%. But I think that's kind of like a good job and a bad job, like a good career and a bad career. Like if you have an employer who keeps asking you to do overtime, but doesn't pay you for the overtime, keeps asking you to take on responsibilities, but doesn't reward you for it. You kind of can get a sense for that. And that's opposed to like an employer who wants to see you grow and who encourages you and who does ask you for favors, but who also rewards you. It's the exact same with friendships where you're going to know which people you're not going to know up front. And that's the scary part, right? That's why doing favors for people is always kind of a guessing game, because you're not going to get to truly find out like who's behind that mask until like a couple of months or maybe even years with people. But as you slowly get to know people and you slowly build up like the quality of favors that you're willing to do for people, you're kind of going to have an idea of, I don't want to say what worth someone has, because that's kind of messed up to people. Like for me, there's a big difference if one friend asks for a big favor versus another. Like, who do I have an established relationship with, and who do I know is the most trustworthy, and who is really, I would say, has the highest return on investment if I place most of my attention there. And that's kind of how I tend to think of friendships. They're investments. Just like if you go buy a stock, it's like, what is the ROI? What is the return on investment? And what is the risk associated with it? Like if something has a low risk, but a low return, but a high risk, that's the kind of friend that goes out drinking every day of the week, but, isn't really there when you need them. Sure. Versus like a stock where, it probably is going to have a good return and it has a little bit of risk, but it's probably worth it. Like friendships are the exact same way. And, not in like an egotistical sense or like selfish way where it's like, oh, it only matters what I get out of it, but more so like, where can I find friends that are going to grow with me together and also going to be there for me when I need them? But who are the people that make, like, you're going to know in your gut when you're around people that make you feel good. Like all of us have that feeling in our gut. So, that for me has made such a big difference. Just finding the people that make you feel good and that you actually want to invest in, that you want to be there, even on the days that you're not feeling that great. And a lot of times I get asked like, well, how do you find those people? And, truthfully, it's just by being curious about the things you're interested in. Like, I got really curious about climbing. We talked about climbing earlier. And it turns out that there's a super cool like climbing culture around that. Like every time you go to the climbing gym, you meet fantastic people. They're like these super open-minded, like, I mean, they're crazy, right? Because these are people that are climbing like, high in the walls and having to kind of overcome a lot of fear. So you're definitely like encountering a certain type of people there. And that's my people. So you go to these kind of, I don't know, events or gyms or meetups or clubs, and you meet people that you enjoy being with. And then you start investing in those people. And that's just kind of how you build a circle around you. Like you go do stuff that you like doing, that you're naturally curious about. And you do that with people that have that same interest, because then you kind of have something to bond over,
Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying. That's one of the things that attracted me to CrossFit so much. And, I've been doing it for 10 years, and that it's literally like, and CrossFit always prides itself on the community is what they're trying to say. It never really occurred to me to after like a few years in where I've actually met some of the best people I've ever met in my life, I guess. And just, putting yourself through a tough workout, with police officers or people who are in the military, and it's just so rewarding at the end of the day, and just in so much anxiety relief for me too. And that it's like, hey, I can't go do what a police officer is doing right now, or put myself on certain military lines or whatever. But, knowing that I put myself through a hard workout with you means a lot, and that we bond through that. And it was like, yeah, man, that fucking sucked, but we did it, bro. And again, to your point though, I mean, one of my best friends that I started out training with, I've been doing CrossFit for 10 years, and we didn't even know each other when we started out. Then how long have we been married now? But anyway, been married for a couple of years now, but I was a groomsman at his wedding. And it was just like, these types of friendships that, like I said, like I feel like am a burden on people just for certain things, but also you build these type of friendships. And there's good people that I can find in my life if I need to, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But just finding those communities,
Exactly.
finding the things that, can help you relieve that anxiety. That's one thing that I was thinking about, just where most people feel like they have a lot of anxiety in this modern world, but they don't really have ways to push that out of their body, so to speak. And just,
So true.
yeah, and just finding
Yeah.
something like CrossFit for me and just putting myself through these workouts 5 to 6 days a week. And just at the end of the day, it's just like, I needed that, where people don't have that release, or they don't want
Yeah.
the release. I don't know what it is.
You make such a good point there. First of all, I love that story because if like that all starts with going to CrossFit once, right? Because if you hadn't gone to CrossFit the first time, you wouldn't have been a best or a groomsman at someone's wedding. That's crazy. How that builds on each other. And the second thing that I thought of is that, exercise and anxiety, it's such kind of a two-pronged discussion where on the one side, we have pretty primitive brains. Like if you think about it from like a technological perspective where, technology has increased so fast that our brains haven't really kept up with it. Like the human brain has been developing for millions of years. So for like 99.99999% of the time that the humans have had brains, it was in this like very basic hunter-gatherer situation where we didn't have computers, we didn't have artificial lights, we didn't have constant dopamine releases through like, games and notifications and big tech like Facebook and Instagram controlling our brains essentially through algorithms and advertisements and selected advertisements. And we live in such a busy world compared to our ancestors. Like for them, it was like, oh, a bison is coming towards me. My stress system, my flight or fight activates. I'm going to run away. And then it's just cruising for a couple of days. Like it's, you're not going to have the same kind of food around you, but it's relatively stress-free for a while. It's not like the modern world where it's like within one 24-hour block, within one day, it's this constant alternation between, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, where it's this constant back and forth between stressed and relaxed and stressed and relaxed, and you go back and forth all day long. And people used to be very active, and now with all the modern comforts of TV and entertainment, most of us aren't that active. So on one side, we are incredibly stressed, like more than we have ever been in, the development of the human species. And we're also the most sedentary, the most lethargic, where we're moving the least. So it's really that exercise, I feel like that channels that anxiety, because some people might call anxiety like unpleasant, but like performers and artists have that exact same energy, but they call it excitement, for example. Like it's the exact same emotion, the exact same neural circuitry, the exact same hormones being released, but they're harnessing it towards something. Like it's just energy. And some of us, when we have anxiety, we go out and exercise and we use it as energy, but the majority of people don't get that exercise and just kind of sit with that anxiety and don't have a healthy way to release it. So, they'll go to overeating or using drugs or drinking alcohol or finding other unhealthy ways to release it, and just instead of keeping your body healthy. And I think that's another problem that we have in modern society, where people don't have healthy avenues to kind of release all that energy, all that anxiety and all that stress that, from that modern world. And there's no, I mean, as you can probably attest to, there's no quicker way to kind of get back to like a stable baseline, to like an equilibrium of feeling good about yourself than by just exercising. Yeah. And that's always the first thing when people are like, what can I do for my mental health or to sleep better, to be happier? I'm like, go exercise.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, that, say if you're an obese person, nobody wants to go to the gym just because of the judgment they're going to receive walking into a gym.
Yeah.
That's the first thing to success. If you're going to do something, you got to, step through the door, or whatever the quote is. And that, you can't sit there and get better. You're not going to get any better doing the same thing by sitting there on the couch eating Doritos and watching Netflix, even though that's fun. Right. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I like doing that. But yeah. But I mean, I guess ultimately though, if you're unhappy with the way you look, your weight, your health in general, that what you've been doing is not working, obviously, and that's why you're in
Right.
the position that you're in right now. So you got to do something, whether it's, go walk around the block or actually go to a gym. But you just got to get over those. You got to get out of your own way is what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
start to learn that, hey,
Yeah.
there is some benefits to this and I can clear my head and I actually feel ultimately better. And one of the things I like to say on here a lot is that, uh, Peter Attia, he's always talking about keys to
Oh yeah.
longevity
Mm.
is doing hard things, and whether that be physically or mentally. And I think now there's a lot of research starting to come out about how, you know, keeping your brain active and doing, challenging it, whether
Mhm.
it's start playing golf, learn a musical instrument, read a book a month. I don't know, have cool conversations like this that it actually decreases, what Alzheimer's and all those type of cognitive
Yep.
diseases where that it leads to more longevity and that which
Yes.
people just have to learn, I think, to get out of their own way and go. And I'm not saying you have to go run marathons and stuff like that, but go try to like walk around the block and see how you feel and attest to that. And like, okay, cool, I can do this. Let me do it again. And then,
Yeah.
and if you feel even better, like you got a clear mind, you felt a little anxiety relief just from walking. I'm not saying go run or go do CrossFit or go climb,
Mhm.
whatever, but just go do something. You go do something. I mean, what you're doing is not.
Yeah.
So you got to get caffeinated. You got to get motivated. And you got to go do
Yeah.
something. That's my
Yeah,
whole.
no, that's a great tagline. I love it. It's so true, especially the point you made about like you don't have to go run a marathon. That is so true. Like you just have to exercise moderately. And moderately means anything that gets your heartbeat up and gets you, breathing to the point where it's not easy to have a conversation. So for some people that can be just a walk around the block. Like you don't have to go run 10 miles. The only thing is that you do something consistently, like, every day or at least like 3 to 5 times a week. And you build from there. Like you don't have to start a marathon. You can walk a block and, you do that every month or every day of the month. And then the next month you can walk 2 blocks. Like, you
Exactly.
start small. You start with like the smallest step you can take, literally. And then you just go from there.
Yeah. I took my mom Christmas shopping 2 Saturdays ago, and,
Mhm.
and I don't know how familiar you are with Tennessee, but it's called Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and it's this really
Mhm.
touristy spot where it's like a family touristy spot where there's a lot of shopping and eating, basically, and miniature
Mhm.
golf, but she loves it, so I took her there, but anyway, it was so packed, like, wherever you had to park at was, like, obviously so far away from the shopping center, and then wherever you park at, like, "Hey, we're here, we're good, we're not moving, so we're walking wherever we gotta go," and
Right.
just the whole time, where I'm just walking along and, like, she's kinda hanging back because she's starting to get tired or whatever. It's like, "Mom, you gotta keep up, man. When you gonna
Mhm.
run?" And she's like, "I didn't know we were gonna do this much walking," and I was like, "Well, you gotta start being prepared a little bit for yourself. I mean, you just can't sit
Mhm.
around and do all this all day just because what if we go on trips like this and you can't get to the end of the parking
Right.
lot, whatever." And I'm not calling her out or demeaning her by any means, but I was
Mhm.
like, "Mom, I mean, we're just walking here. We're not, going on a little trot.
Yeah.
We're doing anything.
Yeah.
That's all we're doing." And
Well, it ties back to longevity, as you said. Like the body really embraces this maxim. The whole biology, all of biology embraces the maxim of use it or lose it. You
yes,
know, and using it doesn't mean use it comfortably. Using it means challenging yourself. Like cognitive decline, again, like things like Alzheimer's, all these different things are severely reduced just by challenging yourself a little bit, like pushing yourself a little bit. And the same with your body. Like you live not only longer, but you have such a happier life if imagine being like 80s or 90s and not being able to do a single thing. Like, what's that life going to be like? Like, do you want to live like that when you're in your 80s or 90s, or do you still want to go out and do fun stuff and enjoy life? Like, you have to do certain things now and keep yourself in shape. It's just like maintenance on a car. Like, if you never change the oil, if you don't take care of it, it's not going to have the same kind of life. And it's the same with your body. You only get one. And one thing you will always hear from people that are older is either if they don't have the mobility they want, they say, I wish I treated my body better. And if they are healthy, they're always going to say, I always took great care of my body. I made sure to push myself. I made sure to keep myself in shape and to eat right and to challenge myself. The big key there being challenge myself.
Mhm.
Like you will always hear that if you ask people. Um, I think that's such a key to like a happy life, just keeping yourself challenged.
I have a goal, and I don't know why I came up with this goal, and or if it will ever happen. I hope it happens, but I want to be Centurion just because I think,
Hell yeah.
yeah, just saying you did it. I don't know. I don't know many people, especially in my family, that have done it, but I just thought it'd be cool. Hey, I lived 100 years. I lived a century, and
Yeah.
and I'm loving. Like I think you said you're 30. I'm 36, and like I'm
Mhm.
coming. And so I don't know if you know how much you know about CrossFit, but I'm in a new age bracket in my competitions, like,
Mhm.
the 35 through 40 level. I don't know what it is, but going into that, I'm still wanting to pick up heavy shit and do all the cool
Mhm.
muscle ups and stuff like that. And when I'm doing it though, it's just like like you said, use it or lose it. Like I want my body to be like, oh shit, we're still picking up 225. Okay, we still
Yes.
gotta keep
Yes.
going here, bro. We can't start slacking off, even if we are whatever 40, whatever, going into our 40s or whatever. And just that, yes,
Yeah.
our body's
Because
like 70s,
we've
80s,
all
be able to
we've
do.
all seen it, right? Where it's like somebody gets a kid or something and then they kind of stop taking care of themselves. But then you're also taking away from your future with that kid. Like
Yes.
what's happens when that kid's 20, 30? Like, do you want to be in a wheelchair and they have to they have to push you around, or do you want to be walking like right next to them?
Yes.
Like these kinds of self-care things, if you want to live a happy life, they're not optional, they're mandatory. If you're not going to be in great health when you're older, if you don't do those things right now, like, and to your point, like you have to tell your body, like, I'm still expecting you to do this. Like I'm treating you with respect, but I'm still, don't get lazy because I'm doing this and I need you to do this.
if if you had to send a message, and you may have already touched on it a little bit, but if for people younger than you and or older people, and if they are struggling with mental health issues, would that be the first thing you would say is, hey, get out and start moving your body a little bit? Or what would be your message to them?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest things that I would say. It's get out of your comfort zone. Get exercise, like whether it's walking, climbing, running, weightlifting. Just do something that you truly like somewhat enjoy doing, or at least can see yourself enjoying in the future. But really get your body moving and have like that outlet. And another thing I would say is knowing that you're not alone. I kept a lot of it to myself out of shame because I thought I'm the only one feeling these things and nobody around me is talking about them. And if I do try and talk about these things, they're kind of minimized and I'm made to feel like I shouldn't be complaining. So I'm just going to keep it to myself, but know that I would say to anyone, know that you're not alone and that every single person, every single one is struggling with something. Like we're all presenting a perfect life, but none of us have a perfect life. We're all just presenting. And it's okay to feel certain things and it's okay to want to work on those and to seek out resources that help. One thing that may help people a lot is my blog at thedebuglife.com. I write a lot about these things, but even if those blogs don't resonate with you, or you just don't enjoy them, there's plenty of resources for you to get help and to find people that kind of can get you out of those slums.
What's a day in your life look like, Mitch?
Honestly, I'm pretty blessed. Yeah, no, I would love to. I would say I've done a lot of thinking about what I want my life to look like, and I'm really happy with what it is because what I do is I found that the early hours are really my most productive hours. So I wake up at about 6 a.m. and I do a morning routine, which is the first thing I do is I just love cold. So the first thing I do is, I'm totally sarcastic, by the way. I hate cold, but the first thing I do is I jump into an ice bath. I have like a 47-degree ice bath in the yard. So I jump in that and then I meditate and journal and read a little bit. And that's kind of for me to take charge of the day, to be like, hey, I'm setting the rules here. Like this is my day, before I do anything for anyone else, this is for me. And then after I do all that, I get some work done. I usually work a couple hours and then I spend, it depends on the day, but most days I'll either go climb, surf, or work out or swim. And I do that during lunch hours for about 2 hours. I'm gone. And then I work a few more hours, and then it's always, fun stuff. Like at the end of every day, I walk to the park to watch the sunset. It's kind of like my end of day routine. I do that with my pups, and then it's done. Then there's no more work. It's just relaxing. And usually it's just reading, dinner with friends, or anything fun. But that tends to be the mold for my day. Just morning routine, work and exercise, and seeing friends. I make sure to connect with people on a daily basis because I just need that.
Yeah. No, we're a very tribal species, I guess if that's what you want to say. We need,
Absolutely.
you said talked about earlier about community and stuff. We need that. I guess there's outliers and anomalies to everything where there is a person who can go live in Alaska in a cabin and never need to have any kind of human connection forever. But I don't know. I don't think there's many people like that, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think that
Mhm.
COVID taught, and I think it's a defense mechanism too. And that COVID kind of taught me that too. I'm a single guy, only got 2 dogs, never been married, no kids, nothing like
Mhm.
that. But and when I, during COVID, and we don't have to go down a COVID thing here, but it kind of halted life for me but it also didn't change life much for me, except I just had to go put on a mask when I went to the grocery store or
Right.
whatever. And at work, I still went to work. I still had access to a
Right.
gym. I was still able to get food. But you kind of, when you really weren't allowed to go around and hang out with people, it was kind of like, oh,
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
other, at first you're kind of like, okay, cool. I don't need people anyway. But there is a point where like, hey, I want to go talk, at least say hey to somebody and maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, say what's up to them and have like some kind of conversation. And
I mean, it triggers like this deep fear in us, which makes sense, because like in tribal days, no contact with anyone meant you're probably gonna die. Like,
yeah.
so it's this very primal, and I'm an introvert. In some ways, I'm even a loner. I love solitude. Like I'm big on it. Like I'm definitely more introverted side, but even then, I've come to discover like you can deny it all you want, but we have that desire for a connection. Like even if you needed a couple days or a couple of minutes, and that's all you need. Like we all have that desire.
Yes. Yeah, we do. And that's one thing that I've learned that because, when people used to say, or I even was a person like, talking about, if I was burdening somebody and that I would just be a lone wolf and just do my own thing or whatever. But, and I guess part of these podcasts have kind of taught me that just how cool it is in the art of conversation, just to sit down and just talk with a person and just to
Yeah.
know like, hey, what have there been their trials and challenges and tribulations, and what have they've seen in their life journey that I haven't seen, and that's
Yeah.
just how cool it is, and just to build that human connection. And even though that it is a podcast and or whatever, but it's still the same way I would want to treat a conversation, like with you, if we were having the same conversation at dinner, that I would want it to be the exact
Yeah.
same way. And
Yeah.
it's like, cool. That's a cool connection, especially when you get like-minded people like yourself who
Yeah.
all about, hey, let's move, let's make ourselves better than yesterday. Let's,
Yeah.
like I said earlier, let's get caffeinated, motivated. Let's go run through a brick wall and do something today, right? And
Yes.
just surrounding yourself with those types of people and that same cool growth mindset and just challenge mindset is just, it's a badass feeling. I guess that's just what I'm trying to say.
It is. No, I 100% know what you mean. I'm the exact same way. That's actually why I ended up settling in San Diego, because that's where I found my tribe. People that are like that for the first time in my life, where I felt like, wow, these people are like that. Like they want to improve, they want to get better. They want to see me improve. They want to get my potential to the surface. And then you can have conversations like this where you're not held back by some fear, or you can just truly show up as yourself. And then you can have meaningful conversations like we're having. But like it takes some work to get there.
Yes. Yes. We're always working on ourselves for sure. I always like to say there's room for improvement just because and that's another thing I guess maybe CrossFit has taught me, or even just learning to do these podcasts, that there's always room for improvement. There's learn ways to do things differently. And
Yeah.
there's always probably another person out there. I forgot who said this, Jocko Willink or somebody, but there's always somebody out there still grinding or doing something,
Yeah.
trying to be better than what you're doing.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm trying to be the new Jocko Willink or anything, but if I do something like, whatever I put into something, what you put into something is what you're going to get out of it. I firmly believe.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can agree more. Like it takes effort. Things aren't just going to, at some point, things starts flowing towards you, but it isn't until you've put in the work first.
Exactly. Exactly. But Mitch, I think that's a good way to take this conversation home right there. I don't want to keep it on here all night, but I appreciate you being here, and you're a badass person. I mean, I was loved having this conversation with you. But if you want, I know you have the debug life, but if you want to plug that again, or just if people want to find you, or just anything you want to plug in general, just feel free to do that.
Sure. Yeah. No, thanks for having me. I feel like we could go all night. So, yeah, people can, if they're interested in what I have to say, like I kind of write a lot about things that we've been discussing at the debuglife.com. And then people can also follow me on Instagram. I'm the debuglife.com or the debug life there. No .com, just the debug life. And I post a lot about my morning routine there and like the stuff I do in life. So like what I was talking about earlier, like the adventures I go on, a lot about my dogs, just the stuff I'm up to, and the things I'm reading about and writing about. I kind of share that on there. So yeah, that's really the main thing I'm trying to do right now, just connecting to people and kind of putting some of the things I've learned, just kind of paying that forward. So yeah.
Well, cool. Again, I mean, I appreciate you doing this. I mean, I enjoyed talking with you, and maybe down the road, hopefully we can do it again sometime. So
I would love to. Sounds great. I appreciate you.
all right. Well, anything else? Any other last messages you want to give out, or?
No, I would just say, people, thanks for listening. And again, there is so much anxiety and so much doubt. Like each and everyone of us has that. It's not unique to you. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's something really to learn from, and it can, if you're willing to if you're willing to lean into that curiosity, there's so much you can learn about yourself and you won't regret it. So I just want to encourage people to get curious about themselves.
Cool. Well, I love it. Thanks, Mitch.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Right here, folks. See you.